All right, Prime Minister Modi there in his monthly Mann Ki Baat radio address. This is the 125th edition. But back to the big focus story, and that is coming in from Tianjin in China, in northeastern China, where Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping of China have met. The first bilateral meeting in over 10 months. The last time they met was on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan in Russia. But very, very important discussion this, not just in the bilateral context, given the ongoing border tensions between India and China, which has been going on for the last 5 years since Galwan. A process of normalization was started back in Kazan in 2024 when the first step, the first D, as it were, disengagement was agreed to. That process of disengagement is complete. Now there are two more steps of de-escalation and de-induction, which both sides have to undertake. But more importantly, there's also a multilateral context in which this meeting has happened, and that is the elephant in the room, the overhang, which is the Trump tariffs. All countries are having to deal with it. India more so, because India is the only country that Trump has tariffed twice. 25% for reciprocal tariffs and 25% oil tariffs, which India is the only country that is singled out for these oil tariffs. That, of course, would have been an overhang in the room as well. President Xi Jinping also referring to both India and China as civilizational states, and both need to be good friends and good neighbors. What may that entail? Let me go across to Siddhant, my colleague who's been tracking this story. So 4 or 5 things that the Prime Minister spoke about in his opening comments. He said about the border management mechanism when the special representatives met when Wang Yi was here last week. He talked about direct flights, resumption of the Mansarovar Yatra, some 4 or 5 broad things that the Prime Minister touched upon, Siddhant.
Well, that's right, Zaka. There has been a lot of progress in terms of bilateral, agenda between the two countries since the Kazan meeting of the two leaders. Now, Prime Minister himself announced that there is going to be the resumption of direct flight between India and China. Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has already resumed. China has assured India for the supply of rare earth, fertilizers, and boring machines. At the same time, as far as boundary issue is concerned, Zaka, there was this visit of Wang Yi to India. In fact, during the SR level talks, some of the key points which both sides agreed to. One is going back to the 2005 agreement, Zaka. That is one of the key takeaways from the SR level talks. Then reasonable and mutually accepted framework for the settlement of boundary question. WMCC expert groups have been formed to explore early harvest. Working group under WMCC to advance effective border management, creation of general level mechanisms. So these were some of the key announcements from the SR level talks. Now, since Prime Minister Modi is in Tianjin, in fact, he met President Xi. Perhaps there are 2 takeaways so far we know, Zaka, from this meeting. One, the word which is coming from Tianjin is cooperation with a long-term vision in all fields. So Prime Minister Modi, when he met Wang Yi also in India, he told Wang Yi predictability. He used the word predictability. So here also we have been told that India is looking for cooperation with a long-term vision. So with relations with China, Zaka, there's always been the issue of predictability. So perhaps India is looking for a long-term vision as far as this relationship is concerned, and predictable relationship. So that is what we have been given to understand. Also, Zaka, opening remarks made by President Xi. In fact, he spoke about civilizational countries. So talking about this particular thing which he has mentioned, he described India as a civilization state and highlighted how its ancient culture depth continues to shape its modern identity. So perhaps the same thing was mentioned by Prime Minister Modi in Lex Friedman's podcast, and now President Xi is also mentioning about India and China being 2 great civilizations. So when Xi mentions about it, it means India and China relations not merely as a transactional diplomacy, Zaka, but as a dialogue between 2 ancient civilizations. Perhaps these are the 2 takeaways so far we have managed to get after speaking to people back in Tianjin.
So there are 2 parts to the bilateral relationship itself. I think fundamental to it is the border dispute and, the flare-up that we've seen in Galwan that happened 5 years ago. There is now a road to normalization that both leaders agreed to in Kazan. You'll probably hear the second part of that today when the readout comes from the disengagement stage to the de-escalation stage and eventually the de-induction stage. 5 years ago, before Galwan happened, you did not have 50,000 troops on either side of the border sort of staring down each other. Neither country wants that. And you could make the case that the Trump tariffs and the given, global complications around trade and tariffs have driven India and China closer together. But there is a degree to that cooperation. How much can India trust China is also going to be a question. The other bigger point also, Siddhant, is later this evening there's going to be the leaders' banquet, and there we will have pictures of Prime Minister Modi, President Xi Jinping, President Putin, all of them together in the same room. And this will also be viewed with a great degree of suspicion by America, and specifically by President Trump, because he's talked about this. He views BRICS with a great degree of suspicion. He says BRICS is to de-dollarize, so on and so forth. But India has got to a point where it now has to say that strategic autonomy is not just mere words, but also strategic autonomy in action.
Well, that's right, Zaka. In fact, all the three leaders, the Troika, will be present in the banquet, which will take place later this evening. President Putin, President Xi, and Prime Minister Modi. In fact, the last time three of them met during the banquet in Kazan, Zaka, on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. And perhaps at that point in time, I very clearly remember that the BRICS Secretariat came up with the pictures of, exclusive pictures of these three leaders, enjoying cultural performances and, roaming with each other side by side. And even their sitting arrangements were also made in the similar manner. So, this would be for the second time that all three of them will be under one roof in Tianjin, perhaps something which Americans are going to watch very, very closely. And Zaka, also very important to highlight that, Americans are really irritated with this visit of Prime Minister Modi to Tianjin. In fact, the kind of commentary coming from the senior officials of the Trump administration, Peter Navarro and others, perhaps they have been saying that India is cozying up with Xi. India is developing friendship with China. In fact, Peter Navarro went on to say the other day that they are sitting on your land and you are being friends. You are doing friendship with them. So such kind of statements have been coming from the Trump administration. So they are not liking Prime Minister Modi visiting Tianjin. But also, Zaka, very important to highlight that this visit should not only be seen with the prism of Trump tariff. And as I have been tracking the developments after the Kazan summit, Chinese side really wanted Prime Minister Modi to attend this summit, and in fact they have they have given all the efforts to make sure Prime Minister Modi agrees to come for the summit.